Every 19 minutes, someone in the United States dies from a prescription drug overdose. Every day, 1,500 people die of cancer in the U.S. The United States currently incarcerates 1 in nearly 100 American adults. As of today, the U.S. federal debt is $17.7 trillion. What is it that these problems have in common? Well, the answer is simple. These problems all share the same solution. That solution is the legalization of cannabis, or marijuana. Extensive research could not find a documented case of death from a marijuana overdose. Yet, it is lumped into the same category of Schedule I drugs along with LSD and heroin. Back in 1970, the Assistant Secretary of Health, Dr. Roger O. Edgeberg, wrote a letter recommending the plant marijuana be classified as a Schedule I substance. His exact words were, "Since there is still a considerable void in our knowledge of the plant and effects of the active drug contained in it, our recommendation is that marijuana be retained within Schedule I, at least until the completion of certain studies now underway to resolve the issue." The reason for this recommendation was that there was not enough research to otherwise classify it. Not enough research. This argument can no longer be valid. The difficulties of doing research on an illegal substance are quite obvious, but there are ways of doing it that require permission from various regulatory bodies. There is now an abundance of credible research that represents both the drawbacks and the benefits of marijuana. To categorize it as a Schedule I drug no longer makes sense. Cocaine is a Schedule II substance, which by definition has less abuse potential than Schedule I drugs. It hooks 20% of those who use it. Around 25% of heroin users become addicted. The worst is tobacco, where close to 30% of smokers are addicted. Many go on to die because of their addiction. We now know that marijuana only leads to dependence in around 9 to 10% of its adult users. The physical symptoms of marijuana addiction are nothing like those of other drugs. For example, the withdrawal symptoms from alcohol can be life-threatening. Medical marijuana is not new, and the medical community has been writing about it for a long time. There were, in fact, hundreds of journal articles, mostly documenting the benefits. Most of those papers, however, were written between the years 1840 and 1930. The papers described the use of medical marijuana to treat neuralgia, convulsive disorders, and emaciation, among other things. Up until 1943, marijuana was part of the United States drug pharmacopoeia. One of the conditions for which it was prescribed was neuropathic pain. It is a miserable pain that's tough to treat. Patients have described it as lancinating, burning, and a barrage of pins and needles. While marijuana has long been documented to be effective for this awful pain, the most common medication prescribed today come from the poppy plant, including morphine, oxycodone, and Dilaudid. Derivatives of the cannabis plant can be used to lessen the prescription drug overdose epidemic in the U.S. Sometimes marijuana is the only thing that works. Take the case of Charlotte Fiji from Colorado. She started having seizures soon after birth. By age 3, she was having 300 a week, despite being on 7 different medications. Medical marijuana has calmed her brain, limiting her seizures to 2 or 3 per month. Cannabinoids, or the active ingredient derived from the plant, may cause anti-tumor effects in various ways as well. They can cause the initiation of cell death, inhibition of cell growth, inhibition of blood vessel invasion by the tumor, and halting the spread of cancer from one organ to another. The use of marijuana to treat cancer patients or to improve their quality of life has proved to be successful in many instances. Another story comes from Louisiana, but this tale illustrates how the criminal justice system handles marijuana. Bernard Noble is a 47-year-old truck driver who relocated his family from New Orleans to Kansas City after losing his house to Hurricane Katrina in 2005. In 2010, he returned to the Big Easy to visit his father. On October 27th, two cops spotted Noble riding a bicycle down South Miro Street. They ordered Noble to stop and frisked him. They found a small bag containing less than 3 grams of marijuana. An Orleans Parish jury convicted Noble of marijuana possession because he had prior felony possession convictions. Louisiana law called for a mandatory minimum sentence of 13 1/3 years. Donna Wadenhaft, Noble's public defender, says, "It doesn't matter how much or how little marijuana is involved. In Louisiana, you can get twice as much prison time for marijuana possession as you can for sexual battery." But 13 years for 3 grams? That seems insane. Moved by Noble's record as a providing father, the sentencing judge took pity and handed down only 5 years in prison. Outraged by the nickel, Orleans Parish DA Leon Cannizzaro Jr. appealed the ruling. Cannizzaro wanted the full 13 years, and after 3 appeals, he got it. Earlier this year, the Louisiana State Supreme Court declared that a judge could waiver mandatory minimum only in exceptional cases. And Bernard Noble, the court ruled, was entirely unexceptional. Gary Wainwright, a defense lawyer with 2 decades of experience in the New Orleans Parish Courthouse, says, "You might think this is a horror story, but not in Louisiana. We've had people receive sentences of natural life for marijuana here." Louisiana lawmakers take a perverse pride in maintaining some of the harshest marijuana laws in the country. 1 joint can get you 6 months in the parish prison. Second offense, up to 5 years. Third, up to 20. Louisiana imprisons more of its residents per capita than any other state. In many parts of the state, the parish or county prison is the largest single employer. Wainwright says, "You can't run a prison without inmates, and the easiest way to keep the jails full is to arrest Black men for pot possession." The ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, found that Black people were 3.7 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than white people. This is at a time when white and Black marijuana usage rates are virtually identical, at about 12 to 14%. The first anti-marijuana laws in the Midwest and the Southwest during the 1910s and 20s were directed at Mexican migrants and Mexican Americans. Artists and performers, especially Black jazz musicians, were common targets. Today, Latino and Black communities are still subject to widely disproportionate marijuana enforcement practices, even though these groups are no more likely than whites to use or sell marijuana. Over the past decade, the white arrest rate for marijuana possession held steady, around 192 arrests per 100,000 white people. Meanwhile, the Black arrest rate skyrocketed. In 2001, it stood at 537 arrests per 100,000 Black people. By 2010, it had climbed to 716 per 100,000 Black people. In 2012, there were 749,325 marijuana arrests in America. We're not even talking about dealers moving weight. In New York and Texas, the states with the most marijuana arrests, 97% of pot arrests in 2010 were for simple possession. Over the past decade, as police departments around the country adopted New York City's data-driven CompStat policing model, put arrests based on stop and frisk as an easy way for precincts to pad their numbers. Queens College Society professor Harry Levine brought the problem to light in 2009 when he discovered that during the previous year, the NYPD made more pot arrests in 12 months than during the 18 years under Michael Bloomberg's 3 mayoral predecessors. If you drop a gram of sour diesel on the sidewalk in Seattle, a police officer may help you sweep it up. Do that in New Orleans, and you could face 20 years hard labor. Cops elsewhere continued to carry out marijuana busts at a rate of more than one every 42 seconds. Putting people in jail is expensive. Nearly 1 in 8 drug prisoners in America are behind bars for marijuana-related offenses, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. This costs taxpayers over $1 billion annually to incarcerate pot offenders. In Michigan, it costs $34,183 per inmate annually. The legalization of marijuana would allow this funding to be used for other purposes more beneficial to society. The issue of overcrowding in prisons would also be resolved, and more room would be made available for more serious criminals. The struggle to end the war on drugs, which is at heart a movement to stop the mass incarceration of Black men, is creating one of the greatest business opportunities of the 21st century. Legal marijuana in America is now estimated to be a $1.43 billion industry and is expected to grow to $2.34 billion in 2014. If those numbers hold, the 64% increase, a steeper trend line than global smartphone sales, would make pot one of the world's fastest growing business sectors. Replacing marijuana prohibition with a system of taxation and regulation similar to that used for alcoholic beverages would produce combined savings and tax revenues of between $10 billion and $14 billion per year, according to a June 2005 report by Dr. Jeffrey Miron, a visiting professor of economics at Harvard University. The report has been endorsed by more than 530 distinguished economists who have signed an open letter to the president and other public officials calling for an open and honest debate about marijuana prohibition. Dr. Miron's paper, The Budgetary Implications of Marijuana Prohibition, concludes that replacing marijuana prohibition with a system of legal regulation would save approximately $7.7 billion in government expenditures on prohibition enforcement, $2.4 billion at the federal level, and $5.3 billion at the state and local levels. Revenue from taxation of marijuana sales would range from $2.4 billion per year if marijuana were taxed like ordinary consumer goods, to $6.2 billion if it were taxed like alcohol or tobacco. Looking at the current state of marijuana legality, we have seen Colorado and Washington legalize it. They are currently the pioneers in how to regulate and control the legal marijuana. In Colorado, 100,000 patients drove a $300 million medical marijuana industry last year, says Tripp Kieber, a capitalist entrepreneur who has stakes in 17 marijuana-related businesses. 10% of Colorado's 5 million residents, or 500,000 people, would be having a relationship with cannabis. We get 10 million visitors every year, says Kieber. Even if only 5% of those tourists make a purchase, that's 3 million people a year. We're talking about hockey stick growth, he says. This is only one state of the 51 in the U.S. This product is going to revitalize the entire nation's economy. Not only will there be direct sale of marijuana, but the market for all of the byproducts and complementary goods will explode as well. The current demand for hemp fiber is still relatively low, although new uses for it continue to be developed. The energy crisis is shining new light on it for continued development. The energy crisis is shining new light on renewable crops such as hemp as a source of energy. The value of the cellulose-rich hemp as a source of paper, building materials, fuel, and animal bedding is now universally recognized, and the multitude of nutritional benefits contained in the hemp seed are manifesting themselves in numerous foods and healthcare products. However, until hemp can once again operate in the free market, it will not even be given the chance to succeed. Through the legalization of marijuana, the United States can reduce the number of overdoses from prescription drugs, lessen the number of people suffering and dying from cancer, reduce the number of prison inmates, and stimulate economic growth. Next time the legalization of marijuana is on the ballot in your city, make sure you vote yes.